Welcome back to the Respect the Drive podcast. I'm Tedward. We've got a good show for you today. I've got an excellent guest, a good friend of mine who is a wealth of technical knowledge and who has suffered some severely bad luck on cars that normally don't give you much trouble. However, he's owned cars that have those dreaded Achilles heels, which in normal circumstances, you'd say, well, I've never seen a car fail from that. I've never seen an M3 with spun rod bearings unless you join the Facebook group. I've never seen a 996 actually have an IMS issue unless you join the forums. Well, no, he's actually experienced a couple car fatalities from some pretty frustrating circumstances and somewhat shocking circumstances. So Mike, he really knows his way around this stuff. He's a mechanical engineer, and he is going to tell us about his tragedies of car ownerships. But right now, I'm just trying to get back into the podcast game. You know, the podcast is not a lucrative thing for me at the moment, and that's probably my fault. It's not sponsored, although I do love to promote some friends' businesses that have helped me out along the way. I just bought this Honda Civic Type R, and how can I not talk about craft detailing when they've done an incredible job paint correcting, ceramic coating, and putting paint protection film on the front of the car? I mean, they're literally making this car beautiful for the lifetime that I'm going to own it, at least, which is great. And they did it at Garage 42 in Woburn, Massachusetts. But more exciting than Garage 42, a great car storage facility for your supercars, they're opening a larger facility. Yes, Garage 42 West is opening in Acton, Massachusetts in 2023. There's going to be some groundbreaking happening pretty soon, but man, it's a cool space. There's going to be room for, I think, 150 cars, and I'm not counting my chickens before they've hatched, but I believe there's going to be a podcast studio installed, which is going to make this a lot easier and more regular. And instead of inviting people to my basement, we'll have a cool spot with a bunch of beautiful cars to stare at. Put us in the mood for some good conversation. But I'm a bit anxious. That's not a surprise. I'm a very anxious person. I know on the comment section of my videos, I get a lot of messages that say like, wow, you're always so happy all the time. And I say, wow, I'm doing a good job of being a YouTuber. If that's the vibe that's getting transmitted through the series of tubes that is the internet. But no, I'm flying out to Arizona, then Los Angeles, then San Diego, then back home. So I'm gone for a couple weeks, and I'm going to be driving a bunch of great cars. I'm not going to say what those cars are yet, because I am of the mind that if I say something good is going to happen, it will be jinxed. It will be revoked. The universe will take it away. And I'm not like an astrology guy. I'm not even that superstitious, but hey, maybe I am, because I do. Do you ever feel like you've announced something? You've said, ooh, hey, guys, I just got tickets to this concert. Or guess you're never going to believe the opportunity I'm getting. It's happening in 2 weeks. Well, guess what? That's the kind of stuff where, lead singer got sick, concert's off, not happening. Or my friend was going to go to the GP ice race in Austria. That's like the coolest event of the season, where people are out there driving 550 Spiders, F40s, F50s, Koenigseggs, whatever, all kinds of vintage Porsches, Aston Martins out on this beautiful ice track. Probably the best photography in the automotive community gets taken at the GP ice race. Well, guess what? It's canceled. Austria does not have the temperatures to sustain the ice race this year. And I think my friend feels the same way. He said he was going, and 2 weeks later, he's not going. It's canceled. So I'm going to try not to jinx things. I'm pretty confident that I can tell you that I'm going to Sedona, then LA, then Encinitas, and then home. Those things should be in check. But I'm not going to announce the cars until they are published on the YouTube channel. I'm just excited to go be with some friends, have kind of a boys' week with the Topher and Charlie from the Daily Motor and substitute Topher, my buddy Chris Brower. Man, they're good guys. I love spending time with them. And I've been keeping up with my resolutions. If you didn't see the video, you should see the video. But I did talk about 2023 resolutions, my 3 resolutions. Number 1, I want to run a half marathon. Number 2, I'd like to buy a house, a little pied de terre de Tedward. That would be sweet. And I want to open my merch store, which I am on my way to because that's one thing I can't jinx because it's happening. I've got this great guy, Cole, who's been helping me out with some graphic design. I think we have some cool things that we're going to put on some t-shirts, some hats, things like that. Like I'm pretty psyched about that. But running has been insane for me just because, man, I've utilized running to stave off the anxiety, the depression, the seasonal misery. And despite the impending doom of our changing climate that seems to be giving us 50-degree weather here in New England in January. Very strange. I bought Blizzaks for my Type R, and yet I don't need them. I probably could have just stuck it out with the PS4s, but the sidewall doesn't hurt. But what I'm trying to say is these unseasonably warm temperatures have made it much easier to sustain my mileage on foot because I'm able to run pretty regularly and I don't have to go too crazy in the cold. I'm not slipping on the ice. My big fear in running in the winter is always that I'm going to slip on ice and crack my head open. And it's like, wow. While engaging in an activity to improve the longevity of your life, you slipped and fell on your head. Isn't that the trauma of life where everything you do, every action you take to improve your life has a little bit of a risk of ending it prematurely? Oh man. Okay. So you're getting an insight into the anxiety of my life. But all right. Let's just embrace it today because this episode is all about failure. It's all about embracing a traumatic failure of multiple cars. This is Mike. Let's get into it. Well, Mike, here's the thing. You have had an eclectic collection of cars, but not necessarily anything that's out of the ordinary or outrageous. It's just that your story is one of everyone's nightmares because the cars that you owned have often been like critiqued on the internet for having Achilles heels, let's say.
Definitely.
Yet I've seen every forum post in the world for every car you've owned saying, oh, that'll never happen. That's like the 0.00001% of people. It's blown out of proportion. Nothing will ever happen. Except that you actually have had two cars essentially blow up. One two literal blow ups. One of them was like an actual catastrophic explosion.
Yes. Yep. Rapid unscheduled disassembly, as they say. So at the 335, the first one.
Yeah, let's start with an E. Yeah. It seems like a fairly simple car. It's an E92 335i.
Exactly. I got it. I went to college and had no car for a little bit and had a little bit of money saved up and basically went half and half-ish. My dad paid a little bit more with my dad.
Thanks,
on a
Dad.
Car. Yeah, exactly. I had maybe $6,000 at the time of all the money I have.
I've been there. I once was the recipient of a $4,000 check from my grandfather, which, as far as I was concerned, was six figures.
Just the bottomless pit of money.
It was like I needed a Celica GTS in the worst way, and I think I had like $6,000, and I think I needed $4,000, and my grandfather put it up.
Oh,
and
sweet.
I was like, oh my God, I'm rich.
Yeah, no, now
I have a rich.
Now I'm cruising.
I was like, hey, I better not tell anybody that I have a rich family. I just came into $4,000, which I know if you're listening to this and you're 17, like it does feel that way. And if you don't have that $4,000, it is literally the deal breaker that makes or breaks you. But anyway, so you managed to get into a sweet E92.
Yeah, I really liked it. I got it from CarMax, which ended up being perfect because it had a few little things here and there, and they have great warranties for the first, I think, 3 months or 6 months or something. So a few things got handled with. But other than that, it was a fairly reliable car. I never had anything other than oil changes. Not that you would not expect that because it had 60,000 miles. I mean, it was a nice 335. It was an LCI car, M Sport, one hump for those that are in the E92 gang.
All the nerds. So it doesn't have what that means for the people who aren't absurd BMW people. It means that it only has the dashboard hump for like the gauges. It doesn't have the infotainment system with the iDrive.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay.
Jinx. So it was a really cool spec, Le Mans blue over saddle brown. I got really lucky finding it, basically.
It was a beautiful car.
Yeah. And I thought a while about going down the side of modifying it just because those motors can take so much.
It was an N55.
And it was an N55. So it's going to be reliable, and you can just add 8 PSI and have a ton of fun, basically.
Sure.
Just replace the charge pipe and call it a day. I ended up replacing the charge pipe.
Then you get to be one of those guys who constantly is like, idiot with his EM3. My 335 is fast. So much faster than you. I paid half of what you paid, idiot.
Exactly. And then every time you drive an M3, you're like, oh my God, the steering is so much better.
It's so much better. Oh my God.
So the only downside of my spec, it was an X-Drive. And so it didn't get the M Sport suspension that you get usually with the package, but whatever. I digress.
This is my big flaw is I brought a fucking car nerd.
I'm
car
super,
nerds come on and you're
nerd.
like, you guys bury the lead. Your car exploded. And you're like, it didn't have the M suspension.
Well, I'm painting the picture of it was a great car.
It was a great car.
It was a really great car. I still miss it to this day. I put on the Performance Power Kit, which is the only tune or big mod it took from me, which adds a little bit of boost, but it's not like adding a ton of power. I'm not straining the motor or the drivetrain or anything by giving it 500 horsepower. Not that you can give them that stock. No one's. But so it wasn't that modified. I had it on snows for the winter. I drove to Colorado and back for a weekend doing some climbing with my roommate. We got back. The next day I put summer tires on, and I'm like, great. Brand new PS4s. They had just dropped at the time. This is 4 years ago now. And we go on a mildly spirited drive, just nothing crazy. I mean, the tires still had like the release agent on them. It was the first drive after that. I'm driving with my friend Andrew, and we're just having a good time listening to some music, and all of a sudden we smell something a little bit funny, which as a 944 owner in the past has always been, I'm cognizant of the smells and sounds. Yeah, I've just been trained to be like that.
Just disintegrating German particles.
So I was a little nervous, and it has a manual e-brake, and my first thought was like, did I leave the e-brake up? And it's rubbing a little bit, and the chime forgot to go. Something like that.
Something smells warm.
Exactly. Something smelled a little bit warm. And so we kept going for a little while, and I thought, the smell's not really going away. It's not really getting that much worse, but it's not getting better.
Are you playing the game where you're like, there's no cars in front of me? It can't be that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're in the middle of Kansas, and then there's really no one around.
Then you start to think, you're like, well, how could it be me if I'm driving?
Exactly.
Because shouldn't all the smell go away? Shouldn't it be taken away? Trust me, I owned BMWs. I lived my life. What's that smell? Could it be me? It's not me. It's always me.
Yeah. And so I was a little worried, but not at that level where like I need to pull over yet. Just a mild, I'm going to keep smelling this for a few minutes, and we're going to hopefully determine the cause. Don't know if that was a mistake or not. Hard to tell. We keep driving for a little bit.
I don't think the results would have changed.
I agree.
Genuinely.
To paint a picture of where we are for people that have never heard of me, we're in Manhattan. We're actually outside of Manhattan, Kansas.
Which actually, one of my favorite TV shows is...
Yes! It's right near.
It's on HBO Max.
Yep.
It's on HBO. It's the Bridget Everett show. It's called Somebody or Someone Somewhere. I can't remember because somebody and someone are the same word, and it's dumb that we have them both. We should choose one. So later on the podcast, we're going to vote which we eject from the English language. But anyway.
Yeah, docs Tom. You can text him.
But from what I've seen in that show, it is vast.
Yep.
It's just a big old place. It's pretty flat.
It's rolling hills. There are some decent driving roads, believe it or not. But there's no one around is the point. You have farms, you have some government-owned land, stuff like that, but there's not, for example, there's no fire department that is coming to, not to spoil what's going to happen here, but there's no fire department.
It's like, so the fire department is essentially like a group of
volunteers.
Citizens who are just like, they gave me the pants.
Exactly. Yeah, they sign up.
Yeah, I have the pants. They told me I can go.
Yeah, exactly. So there's, if you call the cops, there's no town, like, you're going to get a state police officer.
Right.
So.
And he's going to drive 140 miles an hour.
And be there in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And so we smell a little bit funny. We're not that far outside of town. And I'm like, all right, fine. We'll limp it back home. I'll take a look at this. Like, annoying. We keep driving for a little bit. And all of a sudden, a plume of smoke comes through the vents.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, oh, God. And I immediately started to pull over. As I'm pulling over, I get the dreaded, is your window down or your door open or is your engine on fire warning chime from BMW.
Or, hey, is it 37 degrees?
Exactly.
It's the same chime for everything.
I get that, but I get the four-wheel drive message, a check engine light, like the bad one, and SR. I mean, every code that it could have shot me, all of a sudden it shot me. Smoke comes through the vents. I immediately tell Andrew to get out, and I say, Andrew, can you call 911? I'm going to go to the front of the car and see if there's anything I can do, but just stand clear. As soon as I pop the hood, there's flames licking the hood at about 6 inches tall.
So this is one of those things where it is so tempting to always go and look at the source and be like, what is going on in there? And you want to open the hood. Objectively, though, like, I don't think it would have stopped anything, but I mean, you are just like introducing oxygen in a whole new way into this scenario.
And it's such a thing that you don't think about while it's happening.
No, because you're in panic mode and your car is burning to the ground. Also, you're in the middle of nowhere. You're not like in your driveway with a hose. You probably don't have a fire extinguisher in a fairly new BMW.
Yeah,
That's like an odd thing to keep.
8 years old by then, yeah.
Granted, the amount of flames that you were seeing already probably wouldn't have helped.
Yeah, hard to say. I mean, maybe if I had a big, kind of like a system you're going to have in a track car or something, maybe, but not with an Element fire extinguisher. Not to shit on Element, but...
It's not going to do the job. So you're seeing the beginnings of like an actual fire that you're like, oh, that's an actual fire.
Exactly. So I pop the hood. I realize immediately that the flames, I mean, they're 6 inches above the engine compartment, and they're occurring from behind the motor, between the firewall and the motor. And I can peer down a little bit. So the flame is like 30 inches tall. So I know already, because it's 6 inches above the engine, I know already we are past the point of being able to extinguish this fire, even if I rip my shirt off right now and swatted it, in a crazy manic.
Yeah, this is no longer like, ooh, Mom, the pot's on fire.
Exactly.
Like,
yeah.
This is not a Mrs. Doubtfire fire.
Exactly. And so from there, it's all kind of a blur. Luckily, I captured almost all of it on video.
You filmed a lot of this, and I've posted that probably a dozen times because it's like my favorite clip ever.
So I got, to give some perspective, it was about 20 minutes before the fire department got there, and so you got to see, I started recording almost immediately, maybe when the flames were 10 inches high, and all the way to the end, basically, in a bunch of clips. It wasn't all at the same time. But we called the fire department. I then called my mom. Like, there was a lot of time to just like watch the car slowly have that flame spread to all of it.
Is this a place where you felt fortunate to even have cell service? Or was it?
Yeah, I mean, Kansas is pretty good, especially where we are.
Okay,
it's not going to be...
It's all flat. It's line of sight.
I think we're pinging cell towers in our town.
Okay.
So we're not that far. We're a few miles outside. So the flames are spreading slowly, almost... I think you've seen the video about 2 minutes after I stopped, where the fuel rail explodes and sprays fuel all over the engine bay.
Literally explodes. I mean, and your... I'm going to insert it now.
Holy fuck.
That's like my favorite exclamation ever. It's so funny because it's so genuine and it's so helpless because you're so like helpless. Really, but it's accepting. The way you've said this is not somebody who believes that this is going to be good.
Yeah.
You've acknowledged and accepted the fate of the vehicle.
Yeah. No, as time is going by, by the time I opened the hood, I knew it was too late to do anything. I wish I would have like grabbed my stuff out of the car. There was a lot of time between getting out of the car originally and having the flames engulf the driver compartment and all that kind of stuff to have that go by. So I wish I would have grabbed some stuff out of the car, but
whatever.
Yeah.
Who cares? So the moral of the story though is that like I remember there was like Facebook posts where people were like, oh my God, don't park your N55 cars inside. Yep. Even M3s because of the blower motor failures.
I forgot what it was called, but yeah, the blower motor.
And it looked just like what happened to your car.
Exactly.
Now, I don't know if you ever got like a proper postmortem on the thing.
No, so I contacted BMW and the NHTSA to submit reports Because I wasn't trying to hide. It'd be one thing if this car was like meth injection or something. Like, like maybe I just won't tell anyone. We'll let insurance just, the car is just gone.
Which is the case for so many people. They don't want like a big thing. They want it to go away.
Yeah.
They just want it to be like, yep, car's gone. Man, I hope I can. Oh man, once they pay this out, I'll never speak about this again.
Exactly.
It's over. And then in 10 years, maybe I'll talk about it. I'll have a new insurance company.
Exactly. Yeah. So I wasn't posting all over the internet saying like, oh, BMW are jackasses and my car burned to the ground. And I was like, the car burned. There's a problem. I don't really know what the problem is. So here you guys go. Here are all the details. I spoke to an NHTSA rep. I spoke to several BMW reps.
This is so adult. What you were like 20, 19?
20, yeah.
What 19-year-old is like, who I need to call is the NHTSA because this might be a systemic problem and I might be able to provide some insightful data for this to prevent future causes.
Yeah, a big car nerd engineer. So I spoke to a few of them. They never really got to the bottom of it. Unfortunately, the car was so burned.
BMW paid off the NHTSA.
Exactly.
You're hearing it first here.
Yeah,
the conspiracy. This is going to be a big conspiracy podcast now.
And so they never really got to solve anything because the car was so burned. It was burned from the front of the car to the rear bumper. The taillights were in okay shape, but the front of the rear bumper was burned. So that kind of gives a picture of how burned it was. And by burned, I mean nothing. Like the aluminum wheels melted.
Well, your seats looked like wreckage from the Titanic.
Exactly.
It was
like
just
stick figure seats.
Yeah, all you saw was the frame, like the little wiring and stuff.
Like I think the steering wheel has a lot of aluminum on the inside of it, and the steering wheel was just a steering shaft. There was nothing left.
It's crazy. I was blown away because it just wasn't a car.
Yeah.
It was gone.
Yeah,
the
it
car
was really gone.
Really was gone. Now, what is worrisome is in that scenario. So this is where like NHTSA comes in.
Mm-hmm.
If let's say this car was just a ticking time bomb, there was something that was shorting and
like at 11 o'clock that day, it was going to burn,
Right. Or it was just a slow burn that like, oh yeah, this short has actually been happening for a while. This smell, maybe you've had a whiff of here and there, but you've gone on shorter drives. You've done this, you've done that. What if, you're sitting in my basement right now. That's the garage right there. So you run out to the grocery store, the liquor store, whatever. Yeah. You come back, you park the car, you go to bed. Yeah. Well, what if there was just enough heat in it to ignite? Yeah. And now the whole house is on fire.
Yeah, the flames were 10 feet high, 15 feet high off the car.
You couldn't have been luckier with your location because like that F40 that burned to the ground in Monaco. Mm-hmm. That was right below an apartment complex or whatever. And the guy in the third floor was nice enough to start dumping buckets of water on it, which was like easily the sweetest, most what do they call Monogalese? Is that what it is?
Idea.
That's like that is like the sweetest native Monaco thing to do, where it's like that guy probably has lived, like his family's probably lived in that building for generations, and he's not like a billionaire, but he like understands that like Ferraris must be protected at all costs. Like, oh man, that F40's on fire. I better get the bucket. He's got like a bucket in the shower because his like floors leak. I'm painting a picture. It's all made up. I don't know. So that. What was the response from BMW people? Because my assumption about this, like I saw that and I'm like, fuck me, like those blower motors or whatever, like that to me is the most likely thing. But because it seems like it started as an electrical thing and then grew.
Yep.
But I can imagine that even though this thing actually happened to you, it's like a shark attack or lightning striking. People are like, yeah, that'll never happen. But you're like, but it happened to me.
Exactly.
And I just own this car. Yeah. Like I own one too. You own one in this forum. Why are you striking this down? Did you get feedback from people that were like positive and like asking constructive questions, or were they just like, oh, you're lying. You had a meth injection on the thing. Like,
again, I didn't post much of it. I responded to a lot of people on some of your original posts, because a bunch of people were asking it, like, is it tuned? Like, oh, there's meth injection, all that kind of stuff. And I basically said, no, it's a stock car that has the BMW PPK tune on it, but that's this thing you could get from the factory.
Sure.
So, but I really didn't know. NHTSA, other than speaking to the rep, never heard anything else, which is not particularly surprising. BMW offered me $4,000 as like, we're sorry. And if you buy another car from a BMW dealership, used, not used, we'll give you $4,000 credit towards it.
So $8,000 total in that situation, or
No, for just as a if you go buy an M235 now for 30, it'll be 26.
Oh my God. All right. This bothers me because that is like the South Park BP. We're sorry.
Yeah.
Like they're just standing around like dead baby seals with oil all over them. And they're like,
Exactly.
We're sorry.
So I don't think that's them admitting any fault. I think that's just I reached out to the right person and went up the chain in the right way, and someone was like, give him $4,000.
Well, I want to know now what their triggers are because that sounds just that sounds protocol. That sounds like they have a list and they're like, how bad was the fire? How many followers does he have on Instagram? I guess like
what was the mileage?
All right, that's this box and this box. This plus that's $4,000. Yeah,
he gets a score out of like 11, and it's anything past 9, and he gets
That's like outrageous.
Yeah. So that was that. I didn't end up buying another BMW because I don't know. I didn't have the money, and I didn't really want another one that much after it.
Right. It sours the experience.
Yeah. The best cars for that price are 335s. So.
No, it's true. And the 335s were the bulletproof car because the M3s, you were forced not only to pay more to get into an E92 M3, but you were also forced to be like, well, if you really want this thing to be bulletproof, you're going to have to put up $2,500 for rod bearings and all this other stuff. So it does add up.
Yeah.
But
so I guess that leads into the next vehicle.
Well, yeah.
Unless you want to keep going.
No, I think we're good on that one. We can tie that one
up.
I remember being shocked. The only thing I'll add is that where you just parked out front, there's an X3.
Yep.
And that's an N55 X3.
I was thinking about that, yeah.
That car, my mother so it's my dad's now. My mom, she drives the RAV4, but my dad, when my mom was like daily driving that X3, she pulled into the garage once and she goes, it smells like fuel. And I was like, I don't know. And then I went down and I didn't smell it. I'm like, okay. And by the way, she has a really good nose for fuel.
Yeah.
She's like a fucking parakeet. It's unbelievable. She can tell the miners if something
and your
bad
mom
is going
also
on.
former M3 owner, so she knows her.
Yes, she had her E90 M3 competition before I owned my car.
Yeah.
So she says this, and then like a day goes by and she like drives it again. She's like, it smells like fuel. And my dad goes in and he's like, oh shit. And we find on a fuel rail the fitting, the little screw that like screws the rail, the tube onto the thing, like the tube to the tube. The screw that like connects them and holds them together was literally cracked down the side.
Really?
Like full blown. And we're like, what the fuck? Like only way I can describe it is it's kind of like one of the screws on like a brake line. You know, like you put the thing on and then you flare it and then you use the screw. It looked like that, except it was just in half. There was a huge crack down the side of it. And we were like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, Mike. Yeah. Like, and that's all I could think about was your car. And I'm like, what, man? So yeah, I have had a lot of like qualms when it comes to BMWs.
Yeah. And it could have been the blower motor. It could have been something like that. I mean, who knows? But it was not good. And I'm sorry to see it go. It was a really good vehicle.
That was a good car. So what was next?
So that was a great question. I'm a big car enthusiast. As you know, I'm a really nerdy. I'm an engineer. I'm very particular. And I really like driving, and I like the noises and the experience, and I like the turbo lag of the 335, even though BMW tried to eliminate it. I was a little spoiled from the BMW, definitely from how nice it was inside and all that kind of stuff. It was the first, it was a nice car, first nice car I had, and so I was a little...
It's a sick car.
Yeah.
Especially for, I remember you pulling in because you're another one of those people that I met in a parking lot, right? Like, all of the fucking people. Yeah. It's so embarrassing when I go places and they're like, how do you know this guy? I'm like, parking lot. What do you mean? I don't know. We had a shiny car and I said hi and, that was that. And, the only time that's ever been acceptable at the Topher's wedding, all of his friends. I was like, how do you know Chris? I met him in a parking lot. I'm like, good.
Yeah.
Good.
It's all-
And they're
we're all
like,
the
you don't
same
have any
here.
further questions? I'm like, no, I'm good. That satisfies
I know
everything.
exactly how you know.
I get it. What do you drive? What color was your car?
Yeah.
It was a yellow B5 S4. I'm like, that makes sense. Yeah,
Yep.
he would ask you about that. Okay. So you go from this beautiful beautiful 335.
And the insurance paid out above what we got it for, so that was nice. I think they paid out 18 or so, maybe 19.
That's
And
a lot.
It was a lot, but it was also, this is 5 years ago now, 4 years ago, so 335 with 60,000 miles on it. It was in the range.
You weren't, but it wasn't just going to put you in another car.
Yeah.
Like that.
And so obviously that's a lot of money. You can get a lot of E46 for that. I didn't necessarily want a BMW. I knew that I lived in Kansas, and so having a car that operates, it's a lot different from New England, obviously, and how you drive and what types of trips we take. And so I wanted something that was really good for high speeds on 2-lane roads that are not particularly curvy, and so I was looking at V8. That's what I thought. I was like, I live in Kansas. I'm, long straight roads. I want a V8.
Yeah.
And I have been spoiled as a person growing up in New England, seeing German V8s and really appreciating German V8s, and being in Kansas. And I'm like, well, you can get a Mustang or a Charger and a Challenger. And those didn't really get me going as much. Although that's like the dream car of every
That's
person
the
from Kansas.
Kansas
Exactly.
dream.
Exactly. And so I really wanted a V8, and I was looking around a lot, and I was looking at M3s a little bit, but I was like, I have to get like a beat M3.
Yeah, 19 or 18 or 19 wasn't going to buy you
Yeah.
a good M3. Like my M3 with 35,000 miles on it, I paid 35 grand for that car.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
like and you could get them for 25, but a $25,000 M3 at that point was still beat. They hadn't it wasn't for a few more years until they broke through the 20,000 mark.
Yeah. And so I looked at M3s a little bit, but I had to get a really beat one, which would have just been sad. I had a few grand, maybe $2,000 saved up since I had the 335, and so call it 20 at the end of the day, 21. And so I was looking around for a while. I looked at some Porsches. I was thinking I could get like a Beat 996, because it wouldn't do the V8 thing, but it would do all the other things so well. And as I was thinking about it, I was like, man, but like if I have a 996 and something breaks and I'm in Kansas,
There's not a whole lot
it's
of guys
just-
out there who are going to
exactly.
be like, oh, I have all these parts. I've
Exactly.
seen this a million times.
yeah. And so I needed something that I could trust more than any 20-year-old German car, which, there's a lot of good 20-year-old German cars, but more than in any 20-year-old German car. And so I looked around for a while, and I eventually was looking between two cars, which were a CTS-V, either first or a higher mileage second generation. The first generation, manual only Corvette LS3, LS6, I can't remember. And then the second gen had a supercharged LS. So both very good, great cars. I was looking around at those. The other car I was looking at were E63 Mercedes AMGs. The price range I had put me in nicer of the W211 generation, which is the one that's really blobby and has a worse transmission, or a slightly worse W212, which is the next generation, which is they kept the motor. It's right before they went to twin turbos. So I ended up deciding, after looking at a bunch of cars, and I test drove one or two, I test drove a CTS-V, and I decided that the Mercedes was the way to go, and so I had to find one. Again, I'm very particular. I want the right color. I want the right spec. I want the right headliner color.
This is where we differ. I have always been in the camp of like, I will drive it if it's pink, if the price is right. Like if it has the miles and whatever. Like I'd always like my M5, I got lucky. That car has all the things.
Yeah.
I didn't really know. That was before being like a spec whore or like people are so knowledgeable about this stuff that just in my brain that wasn't normal then.
Yeah.
And because this is like 10 years ago.
Exactly, yeah.
Today though, everyone's into it. And I don't know if Porsche's to blame for like introducing the idea of, or it's probably YouTubers in general, like the Shmees of the world, who were like, what's
have
the
it your
spec?
way. Yeah, exactly.
So you knew to look for something.
I knew to look for something. Every car I've ever gotten, it has taken months to find, because obviously I'm price limited, so I can't just immediately go find the car if it's the right spec. If it's 10 grand too much, It's out of
It's
my
a deal breaker.
Yeah, I can't do it.
Your threshold is
Exactly.
literally like $500 or $700,
Yeah,
where you're like, ugh, I don't think we can do this.
Exactly. So I looked around a lot. I wanted to make the most out of the money I had while leaving a small buffer for maintenance, or if I buy it, it needs brakes or something like
What
that.
does a small buffer mean on an E63 to you? Or what did it mean to you? Do you think that like having $1,000 in savings was going to do you any good if you needed a brake job?
I don't necessarily mean like that type of stuff, because that can really suck. It's the little things like, oh, it needs pads. It taillights, some sort of small thing that would have been caught in a PPI, but not a deal breaker.
Got it. Okay, because I'm thinking, I'm like, God, a set of rotors on that thing is probably like $2,500 or $3,000.
Yeah,
right?
I did those.
Yeah.
Let me not go look at that FCP receipt.
Yeah. Oh my God.
And so it took a while to find one. Eventually, I think I PPI'd 5 cars. So it took. Over the course, PPIing 5 cars alone takes.
That's like $500.
Yeah, took some money and it took time, and they
Good
had
for
little
you.
things. They weren't the perfect right color. The guy was like, "Yeah, the paint's a little messed up on the front bumper." I'm like, don't want it.
Yeah, it's been an accident.
Yeah,
they're not
something.
reporting it.
Yeah,
something.
exactly.
When you did these PPI, so I'm the type where I know what you're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
I almost never PPI'd cars. Okay. And this is like a big secret that I've like never disclosed to anybody. I'm like the worst at this. Like, I'm just like, yeah, that looks good. And I crawl around and I look and I listen and I do my best.
Mm-hmm.
But like, every time I've brought a car to like Jake or whoever my mechanic is at the time, like for whatever car it is, I've always been like, I got to drive this for 2 weeks before I even show it to him, because if he's gonna laugh. Like, I'm gonna bring it home. I'm not even gonna like it for one day, because he's gonna go, Tom, what the hell did you do? What have you done? Exactly. Luckily, every time I brought a car and he goes, this is a good one. I'm like, oh, thank God.
Thank God. Woo! Yeah, I PPI'd it. It's a great one.
Well, a lot of times it's just because the cars are in annoying locations, and it's like, this guy's not going to give me, like, I was always young too when I was doing this, and I'm like, this guy's not going to give me this car or whatever. Like, maybe, I don't know. I think I was just lazy and too shy to ask or whatever.
Most of the cars I was finding were from either used dealers or something like that. I don't love dealing with private parties, just because it's a lot of, they just don't want to deal with it, and they don't want to do the whole PPI. They're trying to sell it locally, whatever.
Yeah.
And so I did a bunch of PPIs. I'm in Kansas at the time, and so I was looking at cars. I'm right in the middle. I'll do a car in Oregon, or I'll do a car in Florida, and it'll be a day and a half, and I'll get it home, for driving it back.
Don't you have class?
Yeah, but if I fly out on a Friday,
God.
I'll be back by Sunday.
You're burning through this budget now, because now you're flying.
Well, the flight, it's going to be $200, whatever.
I'm just looking at like a $20,000 budget and being like, this is dwindling.
Yeah,
here.
it was getting smaller.
We're
definitely.
At 18,250 at this point, now that I've burned through flights and PPIs.
And so, but it took a while. I was working all through college, and so I was able to keep saving up some money. And eventually I found a car in Minneapolis at a used dealer. It was the perfect spec. It had, one of my big things was it needed to have radar cruise, which was a really rare option in 2010.
That's so odd, because it was such a staple of of Mercedes-Benz.
Yeah, no, they were one of the first with like they have it on W211. So, but it was hard to find in the perfect spec in the right color with radar cruise and all this kind of stuff, and under 70,000, all the things I was going. I got a PPI'd. I flew in, I think it was German Auto Works, I think is the name of the place. They were awesome. It was really easy. Threw a temp tag on it, and I remember driving home, and I got on the highway the first time, and it was the fastest car I've ever driven. And I remember flooring it and going like, what have I done? Oh my!
Like, this moves
so fast.
There is something really distinct about going from sort of that mid-tier, like an S4, an S5, or a 335 or 340i, whatever, the new ones are, versus getting into like a proper AMG. Or a proper M car. Even the M cars at the time didn't hold a candle because they didn't have any torque, right? Like an E92 M3, I can't tell you how many people got into an E92 M3 and were like, these are slow. And I'm like, what do you mean it's slow? And they're like, it's slow. I drove it and it's slow. I'm like, well, what did you rev it to? They're like 4,500 RPM. I'm like, oh, no, you're right. It is slow. You missed the whole party.
Yeah.
Those AMGs, they fucking boogie from idle.
And it was in Minneapolis, and to give people a picture, it's an 8 or 9 hour drive from Minneapolis back to Kansas.
Not anymore, bud.
Exactly. And I remember that was one of my favorite drives I've ever. It was the second favorite drive, other than the Z06 drive, which eventually we'll mention. But it was so good. I remember riding that torquing the first gas fill up. I was like, I mean, I'm obviously I'm spoiled. I'm a 20-year-old that got just given the keys to an E63 forever.
It looks like your grandpa died and you're coming home from like the will reading and it's like, hey, I got
Just
the E-Class.
partying.
He gave me the AMG.
And so, man, what a car for Kansas. I mean, literally can't think of a better one.
It must have looked so out of place and classy there as well, because like everyone is driving like the Challenger, the CTS, like that's America country.
Yeah, there's I mean, I was in a college town, and so you got your professors and the people that work in the government jobs over there that are doing pretty well. And so it wasn't crazy. I mean, I immediately debadged it and tried to, I mean, obviously that's not doing that much. It's still
the car sounds ridiculous. You
sounds-
start that car it starts like a cigarette boat. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. But I remember, I picked it up and immediately I think I drove that day and I went straight to a friend's house. I didn't even go home. I was like, guys, load up. Let's go.
No, trust me. That's exactly what I would have done in college too. Cause we would have said, everybody meet in the West Street lot. I have something, you're going to die. And everyone would have lost their minds. What's crazy to me is that I'm glad that you had this experience with that car. Mm-hmm. Because everything is so spoiled now. Unless you come out with an MSO original one of one purple McLaren Sabre, no one gives a shit.
A GTR or something, yeah.
And I'm really excited because if I had an M3, I remember one of my best friends in college. He's still a really, really close friend of mine. This guy Chu. He had an E46 M3 that he bought while he was in grad school. He was working and taking his master's classes at the same time, and we were living together. And he took out the most irresponsible car loan ever. I remember when he told me he must have taken out like 90% of this car on a loan. And I was like, when he told me this, I was like, "Are you out of your fucking mind?" The funniest thing was that our rent was like $600 a piece, so it was dirt cheap. But even then, I'm like, "Are you sure you're gonna be able to make a rent?"
Oh my God.
But when he bought that car, it was the jet black E46 M3. He still has it.
Oh my God! Really?
I lost my mind. I was driving a 350Z at the time, so I thought I was hot shit.
Yeah,
as far as I was concerned, I was hot shit. There was a kid who had an S2000, and when I rolled up in a newer 350Z, he went, "Fuck." And I said, "Why?" And he goes, "It's faster than my S2000 in a straight line." I mean, objectively, I will take today as an older, wiser person, S2000 all day, every day.
Yeah.
But still, I know that feeling, and I remember the other side of it because I got to feel it when I bought my 350Z. I also got to feel when I drove my first M3 and realized, like, oh, I'm driving a piece of shit. And that's got to have been a little bit of what going from 335 to this AMG. Like that AMG must have felt tight.
It did
and fast.
Everything better. The steering was better. The grip was way higher. The transmit. I mean, I had a manual 335. They were fine, but I had the MCT like wet clutch. Does launch controls. Will drop the clutch at 4,000. It rips off gears. And it was incredible.
You can put 3 people in it, like 3 of your friends.
Put 4 people in it. I mean, you could load it down and then do launch controls, and people are just like, everyone is just hysterically laughing.
So we've buried the lead because I've sold this as like every car you buy blows up. This one didn't. So these have a head bolt stretching problem, which you can detect by seeing if there's coolant in your oil. So usually you can catch them before you hydrolock your motor. And I was, like many owners, I'm sure, fairly confident that mine was not going to be one of the ones that was going to hydrolock. I've seen the statistics. It's not going to happen to me.
Yeah, exactly. I was in for anyone that does know, I was in the zone of these are the motors that have been affected.
Like the build dates or like the number. They're like, oh, this through this. These are the ones.
And so I was a little worried. I sent some oil in for analysis every other time I changed my oil, and that was all I really kept track of. So during my ownership, the car was pretty bulletproof, and I had a few little things here and there. I eventually had to do the brakes, but like I autocrossed the car. Like it was just a boat that was fun, and it was everything that a Charger Hemi was, but just tighter and a little bit faster and better gearbox.
Oh, and the seats.
And yeah, it was really nice, and it was slower than some stuff, but faster than most things. Faster than a a Coyote Mustang of the time,
It doesn't even owe anything to anybody because that car is so handsome. It's such a beautiful thing. And like we are now, it's weird because it's not that long ago, but we have moved away from like these. It is one of the last like wolf in sheep's clothing type of cars where you're like, oh my God. Like the only thing out there right now is still an E-Class. It's the wagon. The wagon, I think. But even the wagon looks pretty outrageous. It's not as outrageous as an RS6, but still there's a lot to cue you in to that. Don't fuck with that wagon.
Yeah, I mean the W212, the one that I had, you couldn't get anything except for silver brakes, like unless you got the carbon ceramics later on. But like there was no red brake. Like it was all just classy, and you didn't know unless you knew.
And when you debadged it, how many badges did you have to take off?
Like 3.
It's like 3. It's like a tiny one on the door, one on the door, and the back. Done.
Exactly.
Now you'd probably have to hire somebody.
Yeah, exactly.
You'd pay him $100 an hour. It would cost you 2 hours of labor. He's like, oh God, I think I got all the badges.
Exactly. So it was faster than most things, which was great. Another thing to note about Kansas for anyone that has not lived there is everyone will race you. It's like there are so many straightaways that after stop signs and streetlights that if it's a performance car next to you and you give them a thumbs up,
you're gone.
Like,
that's it.
It's a very casual. Like there's no. It's not like you're not racing down Boylston Street. Like it's not sketchy. It's not, is the cop gonna, am I gonna hit someone? Is there gonna be a cop here? Is a dog gonna run in the road? Like you're in the middle of nowhere. Everyone's gonna race you. So you could go out at night in the E63 and go race 5 people, just like random people that you see.
That is a culture I've never lived in. It's like very American graffiti.
Definitely.
It's very 50s style in terms of like, you want to run? And then like, did it feel a little more like, I think if someone wanted to race me tonight, like if I go out in Massachusetts, I'm on Mass Pike or 495, I'd be like, oh, this fucking creepo.
Maniac.
I'd be like, oh, I don't want. That's like here, hold my gun while I walk into the bathroom at the airport. Like, no, I'm good. Like, I am gonna decline this offer to help you do.
Creepy, unsafe, like all of those things.
Yeah, like it is literally like, all right, I'm gonna take that back. I almost went to some really dark, fucked up analogies. I'm not going there, but no, it is weird, and yet I like the idea that like there's this like camaraderie that's
Definitely.
like even if you lose, you're kind of like, hey, nice, thanks for the run.
Yeah, you might want to run it again. If I beat someone off the line, they're like, all right, let's do it from a roll. Like, yes, I would love. Like, we're just here to have fun.
If that happened in Boston, if that happened in Massachusetts, if they won even by like a fucking hair, they'd be like, "You're a pussy. Your car's a piece of shit." And you'd be like, "What? I indulged you.
Yeah.
You wanted this."
Exactly.
And then that's how it would be. So I am glad that there is in modern day America still
Definitely.
a nice, not that I condone street racing, but there's a little bit of a dreamy, nostalgic vibe of this idea that you could go do this. And again, don't go street race, strangers. But maybe in Kansas, it's like a Kansas handshake.
And it depends a lot. I mean, obviously, I'm not doing it in a town. I'm not doing it. We're not lining up. Like one of us is on the left lane of the road and the other one's on the right. Like that's not. I don't want to get anyone the impression that that's what's happening.
No, you're like out on an empty highway.
Exactly. It's not even a highway. It's like this road connects 2 small towns. And there's a street light at the end of the, as you are leaving to go into the corn stuff.
There's like a sleeping cop behind a billboard. Yeah. Okay. All right.
And so it was a lot of fun. It was a cool car to have there, A, because it was good at its job, and B, because it was so different than all of the other types of cars that were there. I mean, I never saw an AMG. There was one, actually. There was a CLA 45 in the town. But other than that, it's very rare to see a Mercedes, and it's very, very rare to see an AMG.
So now that you're in Kansas, you've experienced your V8 dream.
Yep.
It's time to get a little more American.
Exactly.
So what happens next?
So I autocrossed the AMG a few times, and I quickly realized that after getting rides in some other cars, I brought the AMG back. I did a Porsche autocross event, and I got some rides on 911s and GT3.
Turns out weight matters.
Yeah, it turns out the AMG is really good at being comfortable and going fast, but it's not awesome at a driver's car.
Here come the Mercedes forum Nazis.
When you turn up the suspension,
they're like, no, I put it in sport mode. It's just as good. It's just as good as the GT3.
Exactly.
They freak out. Oh my goodness.
I realized I really like the car. After having dealt with all these car problems, I told my parents when I bought it, I was like, we won't do another car while I'm in college. Like, we'll ride this one out. I promise I'll stop being a pain in the ass.
Sage wisdom from a 21-year-old, yeah.
Which they're paying my insurance, and so I'm not trying to, like, they have definitely some skin in the game here about what's going on. And so I approached them, was like, hey, I've saved a bunch of money because I've been working this whole time, and I'm thinking about making a change here and swapping the AMG for something a little more sporty, but just as reliable as the AMG had been, all that kind of stuff. And I remember I first talked to my mom about this, and she said, that's great, like, okay, but I want the AMG.
Sold. Good. Now, how easy is that? Because now you don't have to sell a car.
Exactly.
You're like, here, Mom, fair market value, never been tracked.
Yeah. And so, I can't remember what the numbers were at the end of the day, but I had saved up, I don't know, after the few years, another few grand, $6,000, $8,000, I can't remember. Obviously, I'm very lucky. I didn't have to pay for my college, and so I had, this is money that at the time I was like, oh, we can make dumb decisions with this.
And also, to be fair, you didn't go to like some bizarro world, like private. You went to college.
I'm at K-State.
Yeah, you're at Kansas State. Like, yes, for an out-of-state resident or non-resident, it's more expensive for sure. But you're not like,
No, I just don't want anyone to think I'm trying to paint an illusion of like I picked myself up by my bootstraps.
Trust me, my parents paid for most of my college too, so there's no illusions. I came out with $30,000 in student loans, and that was it. Trust me, most of the people I went to school with had at least 100. That took them years to pay off. And I was under no impression that I was not anything but privileged for having that situation.
Exactly. Same here.
But again, you, unlike all of your peers, this is I'm giving you this one just because, and you don't even know what I'm going to say yet, but it's going to become very apparent. You don't drink. So while all of your peers were burning cash all weekend long on even on shit beer, because at some point when you're 19 or 20, it doesn't even matter that you're drinking 50-cent cans of Busch Light. You're drinking 30 of them a night because your tolerance is disgusting at this point.
Yeah, and as a 250-pound dude,
you're a big dude, so like I can't even imagine. So like, let's just say whatever anybody wants to say about like the money here, you didn't burn it on alcohol, and it went toward these cars, and it's probably close to equivalent.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't I mean, I was an engineer. I still am an engineer. I didn't party very much. I don't drink, so there was definitely some savings happening there.
When I met you, I was like, you don't drink? And then I was like, wonder if he's like Mormon or something. Like I dug into you a little bit. I was just like, do you drink tea? You go with caffeine? Yeah, exactly. Like, and it's not, I'm not shitting on the Mormons. It's just one of those things where like, if I say I don't drink, everyone thinks I'm an alcoholic. I have had so many people, because during the pandemic, I quit alcohol completely.
I remember that. Yep.
And I made a thing about it to try to examine like why I did it. And it wasn't because I had a problem with alcohol. It was more because I was like, it's burning cash. I feel like shit like 2 days a week.
Yeah.
And I'm like trying to work out and get like some semblance of health and physique that I want. And the alcohol was countering that a lot.
Yeah.
And if I just traded alcohol for ice cream, it was a wash physically, and I felt better. And I was like, wow, I can feel better on a Sunday morning and eat a pint of Ben & Jerry's.
That's tremendous.
I'm in. Like, let's do this. Meanwhile, every time I said I didn't drink, everyone did not hear the entire reasoning I gave behind it.
Taboo.
And they're like, oh, I'm a friend of Bill too, which is like an AA thing, you know? And so everyone's just like, yeah, I'm running the steps. And I'm like, good, do that. You should do that. Like, if that's helping you, do that. But I'm like, I'm not. And they're acting like I'm identifying it. It made me feel like a fraud, because I'm like, whoa. What did I say that made you think?
I'm part of this group.
And it's not because I don't want to be associated with it. It's just because I am not identifying the struggle. Like, I can't say that I don't get it, because I don't get it. I mean, I get it, but I don't get it. I'm not living it. And so it was a really weird line. Whereas when someone your age says
21
says they don't drink, I'm either like, oh my God, does he have straight edge tattoos, or is it a cult his parents put him in, keeping him off of it because he thinks like he'll be struck to hell? So it's
just, I just didn't want to. Was the short answer.
And that's the easy way. I just figured, let's just clear it up.
Yeah. And so I had some money to spend, and I was looking to get something lighter and more raw. That's something I learned that I liked a lot, was being slightly uncomfortable or a lot uncomfortable. But having the trade-off of like, well, now the car drives great. I've been really lucky to get a bunch of rides in a ton of really cool cars. Growing up both here and, with the groups we have, there's just a lot of money and there's a lot of cool cars to get rides in. And so I had learned a lot more about what I like and what I didn't like as much, and some thoughts about the AMG where I'm like, I love the torque and I love just being able to cruise comfortably and having this wave of just like thrust. And that's something I really liked. And you can get those in some turbo cars, but it's not quite the same. And so I was like, well, I think it either needs to be really good or it needs to be a V8. And so that was my thought process again. So I came back and I was like, well, I could look at like, I don't know, an E46 M3 was on my mind for a little bit. But
Not going to do it.
I don't fit in M3s really well. I have a really long torso, and so my head hits the roof, which is...
I barely fit in E46 M3s. I'm like a quarter of your size.
Yeah, I don't know how Matt Farah does it. He doesn't drive as very often.
I don't know. He must have like hollowed out the seat or something.
Exactly. And so I was looking around for a while, and as I was looking around more and more, I narrowed things down more and more and decided that the goal of this vehicle was going to be outright speed. Like, I wanted to go as fast as I could possibly go for, it was like 28 or 30 grand or whatever I had.
Every parent's dream to hear from their child. They're like, yeah, Mike, go faster.
I definitely
While you're 2,500 miles away.
Yeah. So I kept that away from them a little bit. And I have always been a German car guy, right, growing up. I mean, we grew up around this area, and so you get German cars because that's the fast, fun car to buy. And so I looked at German cars a little bit. I was like, a Cayman, but you can't really get that much Cayman for 30 grand. They hold their value so well. Same thing with 911s. Like, I can't touch a 997. Like, I'm getting a 996 Carrera S. Fine, but then, it's not quite the raw experience that I'm looking for.
No, and they are buckets of bolts. They're great. I mean, they are. It's not.
Sorry,
No, but it's true. Like, I've spent a lot of time in those cars, and like they're tight. They are tight, but like they aren't. It would be tough to go E63 because now you're going E63 to 996, and a 996 is both less luxurious and less fast.
Yeah. It'd be one thing if you could get a turbo for 30, but you're spending 50. So I was looking around for a while, and I ended up looking at Corvettes, which if I told myself 6 months prior to that, you're going to be looking at Corvettes, I would have said, hell no. Why would I get a Corvette? Only old guys drive them. Every time they're all convertibles. They're all of chrome wheels. They're disgusting. They're not fast. They don't handle well. All of the stereotypes. I was completely uneducated about Corvettes.
Until the Z06.
Until I started looking into it. And I started looking at like Laguna Seca times and Nürburgring times and stuff like that because I want to go on track and I want to go fast. And I want to I'm not trying to build an E36 to do that. I want to get in something that's going to be reliable and I can trust and is safe.
Chevrolet races cars. Yeah. This is what GM does. Their Cadillacs in IMSA are insane.
Yep.
The DPI cars, absolutely bonkers.
Yep.
And it's Corvette versus
racing
Porsche.
Is big.
That's the deal.
Yep.
This is how it works.
And you're certainly not getting into a 997 GT3, which is going to be the equivalent of the same. So I basically landed on Corvettes, and I was looking at lap times, and I literally couldn't believe it. I was looking this stuff up, and how have I never heard of this? How have I never experienced this? How have I never been around these cars? They're so fast.
It's absurd. No, so when I was in high school, a friend of mine, this is like the ultimate, like, whose car is this? My friend's cousin's mother scratches a lottery ticket. This is the next town over.
My God.
Scratches a lottery ticket and hits pretty big. I don't know what the number was, but let's just call it $1 million. Let's just call it $1 million, right? Mm-hmm. Hits a big lotto ticket and for whatever reason decides to make a really poor choice. And I'll just be judgmental about this. She has two boys. Mm-hmm. She buys one boy, the older one, a Celine Mustang.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Mom award.
So this is like 2003.
Yeah,
okay?
When they're at their coolest.
Right, like 5-spoke chrome wheels, fucking loudest thing on the planet, okay? Body kit, all the bullshit, right? Then the younger kid she buys the younger son an anniversary Corvette Z06. So the blue C5 Z06.
Like Le Mans Blue or something. I can't remember.
Yeah, I forget what they're called, but either way. So that was the first Corvette I ever drove because he let me drive the car.
That is so cool.
And I remember the at that point I was driving a Mark III Volkswagen Golf. Okay, it had 96 horsepower. I dynoed it. It had 96.5 horsepower.
That's tremendous.
Okay, and it was probably still an optimistic dyno.
Yeah, that's with the adjustment for the altitude.
So to feel the torque, it looked like I couldn't. I didn't. It looks like I didn't know how to drive a stick shift because I remember like every time I would shift, the car would be bucking around because like, oh shit, my throttle placement matters a lot right now. It was nuts. And I was like, okay, respect. Corvettes are fast as hell. Like these things are nuts. So you find this C6.
Yeah, I ended up landing on C6s. I had the money where if I got really lucky, I could find a C6 Z06 that has not super high mileage. I could find a good C6 Z06, but I'd have to really search for it. Or I could find a C6 Grand Sport. Same dry sump. It's
blah
it's
blah
nice.
blah blah. So that makes sense.
I can find a Grand Sport all day.
And I will say a C6 Grand Sport, very cool car. My friend Tom O'Neill, who's like Chris, the Topher's like really close friend growing up. I went and ride with that car. We did like 160 out in Michigan. The thing is, it's a monster.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, it is not a Z06. And I just don't think the Grand Sport mattered as much to me until C7.
Yeah.
C7 Grand Sport was where I was like, whoa, this is a
ceramics.
bargain. This is the car.
Yeah.
Because and also it was more reliable than the C7 Z06 because
and better on track for cooling.
Total monster. So we get into this. We'll cut to the chase a little bit.
Yeah.
You've got now. I think what it was like a 70,000 mile car that you found.
Yeah, I found it was 60 high 60s. Can't remember exactly.
Okay.
66, 68.
Fits the bill.
It took like 4 or 5 months. It took a long time to find the right one. Doing a bunch of PPIs again. Ended up finding it in Georgia for an older gentleman that had basically said he was done driving. He bought himself a Ram truck and was just done with his Corvette, and he washed it every weekend. I was like, oh no, the paint.
Yeah, nobody knows how to wash. I am aware enough to know that I'm not great at washing cars, so I just don't most of the time. I will wash a clean, like if it's pretty clean, I'll wash it.
Yep.
My car is pretty filthy right now. I'm not going to touch it. It's going to craft.
Yeah. So I fly down to Georgia again. This is broken record. I fly down to Georgia. I drive to my best friend's house in Kentucky, which is on the way home, believe it or not. And I remember I floored it once in 4th or 5th gear on the way there, and I was genuinely scared.
Isn't that the best? Isn't it great?
I was scared of this car.
You were like, well, that is delivering what I thought it would and more because it's
at like 2,500 RPM. I mean, on a highway in 4th or 5th, I couldn't believe it.
It rips, and they make they don't hide it because it literally says 505 horsepower on the badge.
Yeah. And I had driven, to give anyone some perspective, I hadn't driven. I'd gotten a ride in a tuned AMG GT S, which I think you've probably gotten a ride into.
Yep, I've driven that car. Yeah. That was the first one I ever drove.
Yeah, and like fast, like really fast
quick car.
And you believe it or not, like the Corvette feels faster, whether it is about the same speed or not, whatever. The Corvette feels so fast.
Because it really feels like you've just strapped yourself to this. Like
it's just a motor. It's what it feels like. You're like on a motor.
But unlike, or not unlike the German cars that you had been dealing with, it does have an Achilles heel.
Yeah, it's got the valve problem. So
this LS7 is essentially a Le Mans engine, right? Like it's a race engine.
Yeah, it's derived from the C5. I don't want to get too many of the facts wrong. It's derived from the C5.
No, do it. It'll create engagement.
Yeah, exactly. It's a.
If you're angry, rate this podcast 5 stars.
Yeah,
that's how we'll know.
And so I am tracking the car for a summer and doing all this kind of stuff, and it's, oh my God, I'm so happy, blah, blah, blah. We can dive into that later if we want. But I know about the valve drop problem that these cars can experience. The person that I bought it from had not had it done, and he said he didn't think it had it done because he had no records on it. So we
because it's the guides that wear, correct?
Oh God.
All right. Did I just trivialize this way too much?
Yeah. The more it's like Pandora's box. The more you open it, the more you read about, the more you hear the engineers say, well, there's no problem. We investigated them all and we couldn't find a problem. And GM has all these conflicting, or like depending on who you ask at GM, you're going to get a different answer on. If it's Tage, he's going to say like, oh yeah, we investigated it and we found a small batch here was wrong. If you ask the engineers, they're going to say, well, we looked at it and we never found any problems, and there is no problem. You go on forums and like all of the engines are going to explode. it's a rainbow of.
So it sounds very similar to E90 or S65 rod bearings.
Yeah.
Where the company BMW will say, yeah, that I guess it could happen. Maybe. Yep. I guess if you really drive it a lot, maybe it could happen. And then you have people who are like, it's completely mythical. You guys are wasting all your money. And then you have the guys who are like, every single engine is a ticking time bomb.
Like it's like oil changes, just got to do them all, you know.
Oh God, then we get into the oil.
Yeah.
What oil are you using? The fucking oil, just the oil you use.
The oil
just
that they told
10W60, guys, not in the Corvette. Don't freak out.
And so the Corvette, I had driven it. I picked it up from the guy, and I originally had intended to do the valve job. As I drove it more and more, I had been looking around online. Not to say I'm the most educated about this, but I've been looking around online, and I had learned about symptoms that can pop up that would note that maybe your valves are starting to become loose and rattle around a little bit. And so I listened for those, and I tracked the car a ton and autocrossed it. You know, I did 8 track days, 20 like a lot of time.
Yeah, you put the thing on Hoosiers.
Yeah.
I mean, that thing was like on that. You went hard. You were like,
I was fully committed to going fast.
You were very much like, wheel bearings are not a matter for me.
Yeah, they are a wear item now. Everything that you thought was not a wear item is now a wear item. And so I thought, I was like, maybe I'll do them, maybe I won't. And then it got to about when I graduated college, so 9 months ago now. And I was thinking, my parents were like, oh, we'll get you something for graduating. And I was thinking like, oh, this might be a good time to do the valves because it's a significant cost. It's $4,000-ish.
Yeah.
So it's not like, oh, we'll just do it really quick over the weekend. It's like you got to send them out. They got to get it's like real engineering that has to happen.
Yeah, it's a bigger, like I said, like an E92 M3 bearing job is like $2,000 to $3,000 on the high end. You're paying usually $2,000 to $2,500. So $4,000 for just to not even a modification, not even a power adder. This is just to make sure this is just preventative maintenance.
Exactly. And so it was a tough pill to swallow. I was thinking about it for a long time, and you can do it for cheaper, but like I don't want to crack open the heart of this motor when it was maybe fine, send it off to some dude in Kansas
who ruins it.
I put it back together and the engine explodes. Like that's the last thing I wanted. Oh
man, are you preaching to the choir right now? I think about this. This is like every time, and I love Powen, I love Acuity. He is always like, like when I got the SI, he was like, hey, can I put in this shifter in your thing? I'm like, what do you have to take apart? And he's like, yeah, I just have to do it. And he's great at this because he's done it a million times, but you have to take out all the plastic consoles and stuff. And I'm like, can't do it. And he's like, why? And I'm like, it'll never go back the same.
It's in a creak and moan.
And I'm like, I'm gonna be here with a great shifter, and I'm gonna want to blow my brains out if I hear. And chances are, it wouldn't have actually done that.
Yeah.
But in my brain, things should go together once.
Yeah, it's just I did not want to deal with that. So, anyways, I think about it for a while. I'm sitting on this idea, and instead of I did something else for my little graduation gift. I did something, I can't remember exactly what it was. I think I got slicks for the Corvette along with a set of wheels. And so another, about $3-4 worth of stuff, but just not the valve job. I didn't hear a single thing. I did oil changes every like 2,000 miles because the car was getting tracked a lot. And I sent every analysis out and worked with Blackstone to say, are there any titanium? Is there any brass? Like, I'm looking for this problem. Please tell me if it exists.
If there are any like KPIs that should indicate something is failing, something is rubbing, something is moving.
And so I don't do, in summary, I don't do the valves. I decide that this car has 70,000 miles on it, 70,000 not easy miles. And if the valve was drilled not concentric and was rubbing this whole time, and I'm just waiting for it to wear off the the nitride coat or whatever, then let me not dive down that rabbit hole.
You have a video for that. I'll put it in the I'll put it in the show notes. You did a good job with it.
And so if it was going to drop, it's going to have dropped. If it was going to drop, I had 270-degree oil temps doing 40-minute sessions. Like, it would have happened.
Yep.
So I go to dinner with a friend in late September this year, and we're driving back from dinner, and I was like, oh, we'll quickly hop on the highway. It's a little bit of a detour, but whatever. Like, we'll do a little third gear pull just because the Corvette's fast and it's fun.
You gotta feel this.
Yeah, and he's not a car guy, and so the Corvettes can be a little scary in the passenger seat, and so I make sure that I'm gonna be at like 1,500, 2,000 RPM in third, and just like roll onto it, let him feel it until 5 or 6.
Right, so you're not just gonna like hit it in second at 5,000.
Yeah, exactly.
RPM.
I'm like, I'm not trying to like scare this guy.
Yeah.
Like, I just want, he's gonna be like, wow, it's so fast. I'm gonna say yes, let's go home.
Yeah.
And so I do that, and at about 4,000 RPM, catastrophic, like nothing telling me it was about to happen. The car was warm, the oil was up to temp, pressures were looking good. I mean, I'm always looking at this stuff. And so we get on it, and just catastrophic, like trash can full of marbles, destruction of the motor. He hears it, I hear it. He's like, oh geez, something went wrong. And I was like, oh geez. Like,
yeah. Oh, it's always when some kind of not knowledgeable person is sitting next to you that you're literally there to impress them.
Yeah, I'm like, the Corvette, it's so reliable, and it's a GM, so the parts are so cheap.
And
like,
then
the LS7 exploded.
Boom.
Yeah. So the LS7 grenades, it's immediately apparent that this is, I don't know at the time what has happened. I immediately suspect the valve issue. But again, I'd done so much leading up to it of like, do I hear any noises? Is anything in the oil? Like, I was pretty convinced that there were no signs, and there were no signs. And so I was really surprised. I peeked under the car and immediately saw like hot oil steam, that kind of like, when you get oil on your headers and you're like, oh, it's kind of that whitish steam of oil. There was that. And then I peek under the car a little bit. I pull off the side of the highway. We're at a pretty safe spot. And I can just barely see like where the left side of the block is. Like, there's just a lot of oil steam coming out. And so I think that like maybe there's oil on the ground. I then walked around to the back of the car, and the Corvette, for aerodynamics, it's like they cut off the back. I'm sure everyone knows what it looks like. And the whole back where that low pressure zone is was coated with oil, because the oil had come out of the exhaust as it was.
Oh,
the oil was inside the
and it all
chamber.
just came up and it's
and
coated
just like,
the back.
Yeah, coated the back of the car because we're going 80 or something.
So good lesson for anyone like driving really fast on public roads. Like, an LS7 might have just coated the highway with oil.
Yeah, so it definitely didn't go well. I towed it. I have a shop in Beverly, and so I towed it back to our shop, and we immediately put it up on jacks and took a wheel off, and saw instantly that the block was cracked pretty badly. It wasn't windowed, like there wasn't a rod out the side of it, but it was cracked enough to I knew that the motor was toast. So that was really sad.
I think my favorite photo though was the intake, because it had barfed. It had like barfed up a piston.
Yeah,
and
so
like valves. Like, it was insane.
When the valve dropped on cylinder number 1, which if you're sitting in the car is the front left of the furthest away cylinder to the left from you, the valve dropped off at 4,000 RPM. It immediately shattered the piston, and so there's no intake valve left, and the piston is now piston McNugget. And so all of the bits are now shooting back into the intake, which are then distributing themselves into the pistons of all of the other cylinders. Like, it's total destruction. So it was really tough. I mean, there was a lot of laughing, and I'm trying to be light-spirited about it. I mean, I'm not someone to like dwell on the sadness. I'm like, yeah, it sucks, and I'm trying to freaking figure it out. I have some money for repairs. Like, oh, I need like brakes and stuff like that, but I don't have like
LS7
money.
Now, I had two minds about this, because number one, you had been gone for about 2 weeks, and you had said, Tom, you got to take the car.
I know.
Come and take the car. Come and take the car. And I still don't remember why I didn't. I think I was just in like, sometimes I get in modes where I'm like, I'm just not feeling it.
Yeah.
Like,
sometimes it's a mood you need to be into.
I get depressed, and I'm like, I don't want to have this guy's car, or, like, sometimes I just get like, a lot of people offer me things, and I'm very, 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 very grateful for that. But sometimes I don't take them up on it, and it's nothing personal. It's more just, I'm just like, I think I'm just going to do my normal day to day.
Yeah.
And this occurred maybe a week after you returned. So like,
yeah, I had left and I basically told Tom, I was like, Tom, take the car while I'm gone. Like, do whatever you want, have fun, have a blast. I don't care. I'm going to be gone, and I trust you.
You returned and you blew up the car immediately. And I at first I thought, oh, thank God I didn't take the car, because it would have happened, because I would have put exactly that many miles on it, like getting it from your house to here and driving around doing a video.
Yeah.
And then now all I can think is, son of a bitch, I could have caught that on camera. I could have had
Juiciest content.
this LS7 valve drop catastrophe.
I just got all of it
in binaural audio, and it would have been like, I'm telling you, this is why like every time I did like hardcore videos in the M3, I'd be like, fuck it, if the bearings go, I'll have the best video ever.
There's no videos of LS7 valve drops. Like, you would have had.
It would have been it, and it wouldn't have been like some shitbag dash cam. Like, it would have been so good.
Yeah.
And in that regard, it would have been cool, because like that might have made enough money for me to buy you an LS7.
I would not have taken your
I would have at least split it with you, because those are those moments where, like, you know, a good video can earn a couple $1,000.
Yeah.
That video probably would have earned like 40 grand. And I would have been like, all right, here's the deal. I'm going to give you 20 grand. Go buy yourself an engine. We'll do a redemption on it. Like, that's that magic that happens very rarely. And like, again, it didn't happen. So that's what I mean. It was right there. There was an LS7 primed for failure, delivered to my door with the fucking keys just dangling
in the driveway.
And I didn't do it.
Yeah.
So I mean, so for that I apologize, because I think I could have made you some money.
I appreciate that.
And I could have rocked the GM community. It would have been, which is
BMW owner explodes out.
he doesn't know how to drive.
Yeah. The oil pressure was too low when he was driving. Yeah.
What was he thinking?
Yeah.
Oh man. So in that regard, also, if there was anybody's car, like, there's some people that like, they offer me their cars, and I'm like, I am not driving that car, because if that car blows up, that guy is not going to handle it very well. Yeah. Like, his car is already a ticking time bomb, and he's probably a dick, and he's maybe giving me this car just so I blow it up, just so he can blame me for it. Whereas like you, I know you would have been like, fuck, LS7 things.
Yeah, I've been like, that is really a pisser.
And it would have been incredibly weird to send you that video before publishing it, to be like, hey Mike, I am gonna send you something, are you sitting down?
Yeah.
This is just a reel that is going to be posted shortly.
Yeah.
And it's your car.
Yeah. So, I mean, I let a lot of people drive the car. Every time I did an autocross, I would have a friend in the car. It's more fun. And I like, the car is so fast that it's fun throwing people the keys on a safe environment, obviously, like on autocross and stuff like that, just because it's so, like, experience it. Like, it's so much fun.
It is a roller coaster of a car.
Yeah.
Now, the other side of this, there's people who have LS7s right now who are probably driving their LS7s right now. They're listening to this and they're like, oh my God. Yeah. And they're hoping that you're just like, no, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He's just some asshole. I'm so sorry. He really, really knows what he's talking about. Like, Mike is being incredibly humble about his like engineering background and all this stuff. But one piece of data that you have that is uncanny is that you did an oil change like 35 miles before this blew up, right?
Yeah. So I am big into data, and I have always used Blackstone Labs ever since I had a 944 in high school to send out analysis for almost every single oil change I've ever done. Not necessarily looking for problems, but it's just interesting.
I love it. Yeah. Also, for me, I always like knowing, hey, is there fuel in my oil?
Exactly.
Is there coolant in my oil? Yeah. Like, it gives you indicators that are bigger than just, are my bearings failing? It's like, I don't know, maybe my head gasket has
like
a little...
an annual checkup with a doctor. It's like, I just want to make sure that I'm good with everyone else.
Yes,
you know?
It's blood work. It's like, your cholesterol's a little high. Like, oh, I'm going to eat less shit.
Yep, exactly.
That's it. It's like, oh, I need a head gasket.
And especially with the track stuff, like, I wanted to make sure if your oil's really hot for too long, it can be worse at being oil. And so I always was keeping track of that.
For me, it was always a viscosity thing, because I was more concerned about like, hey, if I do this track day, is my oil good after that for another 5,000 miles, or is it toast? And they'd always be like, you're fine, just keep driving. Yeah. So by the way, for everyone who's like doing not like full blown time attacks, but like if you're doing a track day that's like 4 or 5 sessions and you're running like, you know, a high performance car, chances are your oil is pretty good.
Yeah. Anyone that's doing SCCA track night, you're all right.
You're fine. You do not need to drain that oil the second you get home. You're good for a while.
And so I was always looking into stuff, and I had, because of that, a really good set of base samples, which is the important thing, that when you have a problem like this and you are doing analysis to try and find what's wrong. If you don't have any base samples, every motor's a little different. It's kind of like every person. Like, it's hard to base what's going on. But I had a really solid set of 5-ish base samples.
That's
3
fantastic.
or 5. And so I contacted Blackstone right after it happened because I had changed the oil 35 miles before it happened, or maybe 40 miles before it happened. I basically changed the oil at work, drove home, which is kind of a Hajj, and then parked the car for a few days, drove it a little bit, but nothing stood out, which, if it happened like 1 mile after I changed the oil, maybe I'd be like, maybe I didn't put the drain plug on. Or something like that.
Right. Like the car was running.
Yeah. The car was running and the car drove and did my commute, and my commute's 30 miles and then a bit around town, normal stuff. And so I had a really good set of base samples, and I contacted Blackstone. I said, guys, like, I have this sample 30 miles before, like, if there's anything that is ever going to be in any oil predicting valve drop, this oil is going to have that data.
You are holding
gold.
Like just, oh man, it must have been scary to even hand that to the mail.
Exactly.
You're like,
I don't want to lose it. Like,
this is
split
good.
This up into 2 and double send it?
I would have thought the exact same thing. That's so sick. And it's funny because I actually do have an oil sample in my office upstairs right now from the M3. And it was like the one before I did the bearings. And I remember thinking, oh, I wonder, what if this one shows extra wear?
Yeah.
Dumb shit like that. So you send it off.
So I contact Blackstone. They're like, they are so excited because they're saying, they're in the same boat as me. They're a bunch of engineers, and they're like, we really want this because it's good data for us. It allows us to communicate better with customers. And so they were like, we'll do this for free. Like, this is white glove service right now.
Don't you love a bunch of nerds in the lab? They're like, oh yeah.
Yeah. And so I won't name drop who helped me, but someone from Blackstone helped me, and we chatted about it for a while, and he got all of my information and all the car's information. And like, he wanted the full story, which I gave him. And then I send off the oil sample, and I wait, and 2 weeks later I get a call, and it's from him. And he's like, there's nothing in this sample that points towards any abnormal wear. If anything, it's better than all of the other samples you sent in per mileage basis. So there's no titanium, there's no guide substance, there's nothing.
So this is just like the predictions that I've always had about BMWs with the M3s, because although I still paid for and did all of my oil analysis and every time sent it out, I was always of the mind that when the bearings fail, it's been a slow burn up until the failure point. So the numbers look fine. The whatever, like copper or aluminum or whatever is going to be in those samples, it's going to look like normal wear up until the fucking moment it fails.
Yeah.
And that's when it spins, it seizes, it spins, and it just...
Yeah, there's no getting the oil before it fails because it's as it happens.
Now, there are people who have had these moments where they've done an oil... Now, it's not as good as yours because the thing is they've done the oil analysis and suddenly, there's a lot of lead. And then they go, get it on a flatbed, get it down to Wild Motorsport, do the bearings, and they look at the bearings, and the bearings look like shit. However, they didn't spin.
Yeah.
So the difference here is that you actually had a catastrophe.
Yeah, I had it happen. It was proven that the valve was going to drop because it did.
And this is the thing that's so frustrating. It's like we want these predictors. It's like wanting to know, am I going to have a heart attack? Okay. So there are predictors.
Yeah.
You can see cholesterol levels. You can have blood pressure issues. You can have scans that will tell you how clogged an artery is. Right?
Have you and all your relatives had heart attacks? Yeah.
Right. But I cannot tell you how many people I know that have had like regular blood work, regular whatever, and suddenly had a heart attack at like 40.
Yeah.
And they're in shape people, they're runners, maybe they don't eat great, but whatever.
Normal.
This happened to my uncle. He was like in his early 40s. He ran, 5 miles a day or whatever.
Wow.
And he like for a couple of days, he's like, man, I am fucking exhausted. I am exhausted. And it got to a point where he was like, I think I gotta go see my doctor. So he goes to his doctor, and his doctor's like, oh, we need to do some tests, does some tests. And then the next phone call was to his wife, was like, I'm going in for a stent right now. Can you get here? Because this is happening immediately. And he was basically like, if you went running today, you'd be dead. He goes, you would have had a massive heart attack and you would have been dead. want this for our cars more than we even want it for our own health. And this is something that I've been struggling with recently because I bought a new car. I bought this Type R, and my biggest concern is like rust prevention. Okay, I'm doing a really good job. I've done the paint. I need to do some stuff in the undercarriage and everything. And there's a lot of conflicting, like, ooh, should you do this? Should you do that? And for whatever reason, I am more concerned with like the entropy of this stupid fucking machine than I almost am about my own health. And that's like a dark place to be.
Yeah.
And I think with this is one of those things where nobody wants to hear this part of the story.
Yeah.
Because what they want, the best thing in the world, and you would have been the LS7 hero. You would have had data that like Chevy didn't have.
Yeah.
You could have had this piece of data, this
like
piece
this
of information.
Is what you're going to see.
If this spikes, this is the thing.
Yep.
It's like looking at a chromatograph or a mass spectrometry thing where suddenly like bing, it's copper, like
this
there
is
it
the
is.
Thing. Yeah.
And then that would have just given you everything to, I mean, that would have been the holy grail.
Exactly. And that's what we thought with Blackstone. That's why they were so excited. And they were doing, they obviously they do some sort of spectrometer test like for all what they're going to see, but they also, they were looking into like, is there anything that we're not thinking of that isn't on the normal sheet that would be a thing to look for? And it was nothing. The car, that oil change had 1 or 2 track days on it, and then my drive back to Massachusetts. And so it was a higher mileage oil change for me. It was 4,000 or 5,000 miles,
but
which
low,
is still compared
low,
to everyone else.
That's nothing, and it's pretty low load. And what's the oil capacity in that car anyway? It's like 7 liters.
It's more than that.
Is it 9?
Yeah, it might be 9. I think
because it's dry sump.
Yeah.
So all right, so like 9.5. Like 4,000 miles on 9.5 liters or quarts or whatever. That's a lot of oil that can handle a 10,000 mile.
And that's what the oil analysis said is like this oil is a peach, and it's probably because it had that easy highway mileage on it. That I mean, driving from Kansas to Massachusetts, almost 2,000 miles.
So I think like what I'm gaining from this is like this weird level of acceptance where I lived in fear. I still do a little bit because I still own this Porsche and this M5. And this is why I daily drive a Honda now because I can't deal with this on a regular basis. But it might happen.
Yeah.
It might just happen.
No, and I still, looking back on it, I talk with Isaac all the time about this. Looking back on it, I'm like, if I would have had anything else pop, like now knowing what I know now, would I have done anything? Like, am I blaming myself for what my thought process in the past of not replacing it and doing what I was? And looking back, like I thought I was so thorough in my search to determine if this was going to happen to me because I didn't want it to happen. I wasn't careless. I wasn't trying.
No, you knew about this. This wasn't a shock. This was like the second it happened, you knew what happened.
Exactly. I thought I was so thorough in my checking to make sure that I wasn't going to be this statistic of like, here's another one. And so it's a little frustrating on myself where I'm like, man, I wish something would have jumped out at me that would have caused me to fix it. Like, I wish I would have heard that ticking that people say to look for or whatever.
Right. But here's the thing. The other side of it is to say like, oh, I wish I would have done the top end or like the valve guides or whatever. But the same way, it is not a fix. It is a reset of the egg timer. Correct? Like it doesn't change the fact that they are, because you're still using the same valves. No,
it depends on what you replace it with. You have options for replacements. You can go the factory ones. You can also go with you can go with not a titanium valve.
Right.
It's like, am I going to notice the difference in how fast it revs? Like, no.
But you know what? You can't tell your friends you have titanium valves. Or you can because they're not going to tear down your engine. But like the thing about like BMW rod bearings, to me, so some folks will say, oh, if you go with the BE rod bearings, it fixes the issue. It changes the clearance. Well, that is a scary thought to me because clearance is one thing, but clearance there is a cause and effect. Everything you change on an engine has a cause and an effect.
Yeah.
So if you reduce or if you increase the clearance on these rod bearings, you reduce the oil pressure through those rod bearings, which, well, that's not what that engine was built for.
Yeah.
There's a reason that this 8,600 RPM V8 has this clearance.
Yeah.
And it might be because it needs to have that clearance to survive with enough oil pressure at that RPM, which in turn promotes bearing wear.
Yeah.
So again,
engineers worked on this problem.
It blows my brains apart when I see people on forums talk about bearing clearances like, those idiots at BMW, that's the wrong clearance. It's not. It's a bad design, yes, but it is not the wrong clearance. That clearance was determined by a massive amount of data, and it fulfilled a requirement. That is the only thing every choice does. It fulfills a requirement, whether that's an engineering requirement or a cost requirement. That's it. End of list.
Yeah.
And in the case of the LS7, you outlined really clearly, like they were not able to measure the concentricity. Is that, am I saying
the
this?
concentricity?
Concentricity.
I won't dive into the geometric dimensioning tolerancing of this aspect, but it was again, it depends on like who you're listening to. Like, are you listening to people on the forums that like say like, oh, I measured mine and I measured mine and I measured mine? Or are you listening to GM? Like it's conflicting and it's hard to find someone to trust. And I think it's kind of you kind of have to take the whole gamut of what everyone is saying and find kind of the averages of what people are landing on. And some people are saying like every motor is going to grenade. It's like, obviously not every motor is going to grenade because there are motors out there that have 150,000 miles on them. It's like the lifespan of the motor of an LS7 is
exactly
about that.
And at the end of the day, I think the takeaway with these things is to say there is a fatal flaw.
Yep.
And you need to be able to take the gamble if you're going to buy one of these things.
Yeah.
And it goes for all of these cars, whether it's the E63, whether it's the M3, whether it's the Z06. I mean, look at like timing chains on Audis. Like there's always these Achilles heels on like pretty much everything. And some of them are exacerbated by tuning. Some of them are fine if you just leave them alone. Like, oh, you don't touch it, it's fine.
Yeah.
But if you do, you got to do this or you got to reinforce this. But a lot of these engines, especially when we're talking about like real, I mean, we're not that Z06, that LS7 engine and these like BMW engines, they are performance engines.
It's not like a B20 Honda,
Exactly.
Whatever.
They're literally breaking boundaries. Like they're doing something that no one else was doing in a production engine.
Yeah.
And just because it's a production engine does not mean this is a 200,000 mile engine.
No, these were not built on an assembly line. They're not, they're put together by educated people, but they're put together by people. And I think that it takes a lot of, obviously the Americans are proud in their like engineering prowess of like, we kind of just with the hammer, we have solved the problem. And so I don't know where I'm going with this, but I think that,
it was very patriotic.
Yeah. The LS7 is like the LS7 is a very patriotic solution to have it be special and go fast and all that kind of stuff. And it's a shame that some aspects were overlooked, whether that's a design aspect or a manufacturing aspect is up to debate. But it's a shame, and I wish that there was more clarity from General Motors for the issues. I mean, you get when you have like 911s, the GT3s that were having those engine problems, like Porsche's like, you know what? We'll give everyone 100,000 mile warranty for 10 years. And like everyone was like, okay, like I guess, if the engine's going to explode, it's probably going to happen in the next 10 years.
Which is wild because that was 991.1, GT3, big deal. It's PDK only, all this stuff. And there was a stop sale on that car almost immediately. Now, how many years did we have IMS bearings going into cars? Where it's like 98 or something, or no, earlier than that.
Whatever.
No, it was like
986.
986. So yeah, like 98 through 2009.
Yeah,
something like that. Like, and that was always just. We're sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, what an anomaly. That's so different.
Exactly.
We don't know what you're talking about. And it's like, yeah, well, you're not using it on the Metzger engines, on the GT cars and the turbos. So obviously something's going on.
Yeah.
So it is always interesting to see whether a manufacturer owns a problem.
Yep.
Like Porsche has done with that 991.1. But I also can't go and applaud them and be like, wow, look at that. Where there was 2 decades of like, I guess a decade of severe catastrophic failures. Again, same world where it just takes one guy in the forum to be like, my engine went on my 987 Cayman. And was it the IMS bearing? It was the IMS. How many miles did it have? Did you do a Blackstone laps? How do you drive? Do you warm it up? How far do you drive to work every day? And it's just this never ending snowball. And we all try to put together these bizarre, so I'm not like big into I like true crime here and there, but I feel like my version of true crime is these Achilles heels. So it's an IMS bearing, it's a bearing failure.
Yep.
It's an LS7 dropping a valve. It's a timing chain issue. It's like those are those things. What are the conditions?
Yeah, like what is each data point on each problem,
And you know what kills me? Is that there are people in the manufacturers, like the engineers. They're not blind to this. They absolutely know.
Yeah.
And they know better than anybody, but they will not release this. BMW really sucked at this for a while because they would do like my E39 M5, for example. The first American year was 2000.
Okay.
So the car came out in 98 in Europe, comes to the US in 2000. Oil spec, 10W60. Okay. And on the gas cap, it said like, hey, you should probably check the oil every time you fill this tank. I'm not joking. It seriously is like, if you've put 400 miles on this, you're probably going to need to add a little oil. That from fucking new, okay? I'm not joking. It was like, hey,
this is like a Pagani.
Psst, don't leave home without this 10W60.
Yeah.
Okay,
we left a net for you in the glove compartment.
Right. Then 2001 comes. They do a LCI facelift, right? You get the taillights, headlights, a little bit different steering wheel, dashboard, and that's where my car comes in. Well, that car takes 5W30. Interesting. And it doesn't have a warning message on it.
Yeah, and it has the same motor.
It's a thinner, yeah. And so it took, I don't think it was an immediate thing. I think it was years before like actual information was released about this, but it was apparently the piston ring clearance was changed and and then the question was like, well, why change the oil spec? Is it, and so there's different schools of thought on this. There's a school of thought where it's like, well, 10W60 was unnecessary and people are driving these daily drivers and it's a pretty thick oil for like a cold start and all this stuff,
like
which
cold weather.
It's true. I ran it in my M3 and it did like limp along at 10 or 15 degrees. It was rough in those mornings.
Yeah.
But then others are like, well, they changed the clearances and then it was able to handle a thinner oil. But then there's people who will say, no, they only changed it because there's nowhere in like the rest of the world other than like being in, Germany where you're going to walk into a gas station or a Walmart and pick up a quart of 10W60. So I'm like, well, that's like that's like not and that's not a German reason to change a spec to be like,
they're going to say, go buy the oil you need. We're not,
go to the fucking dealership, asshole.
Did you buy an M5? Like
get bent, like buy a box of it. So, and it's always this like level of speculation with these cars. So I just find it fascinating because I've owned a bunch of cars with Achilles heels. I've been very lucky so far.
Yep.
You have owned cars with Achilles heels. One of them, oddly enough, like just what seemed to be a fluke of an electrical failure, burned it to the ground. And then you blow up an LS7.
Yeah.
And what's frustrating is that I remember calling Eddie and being like, Mike's LS7 blew up, and he goes, well, that's what he gets. Didn't do that. And I'm like, oh, fuck you. Like,
I've definitely gotten some of that.
And I'm sure you've gotten a lot of that. But I got to tell you, I would wager there's more LS7s out there that have not had any preventative maintenance than the guys who are out doing it. And of course, a lot of people, it's the first thing they do. It's in their budget. They buy the car immediately. Yeah. They're going to do a steep cam and heads anyway and all that shit.
They're going to go into it. Yeah.
Yeah. And sure, great. Do it. That's, it's been a fatal flaw of the LS for a while, but it just feels like, shouldn't the American engine be the one that doesn't have this stupid failure?
Oh, you should have bought a Grand Sport and this wouldn't have happened. They're like, but I wanted the special one.
But you know what? If you bought an M3, they would have been like, you should have bought the Z06.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So it sucks. The solution to that problem is still in its brainstorming phases. I'm thinking about what to replace it with. You can't. This summer, they discontinued the LS7 from GM Performance Center. And so you can no longer buy crate motors from GM, which is annoying because that would have been a really good option.
Now you have to go hunt for junkyard LS7s.
Yeah, I mean, there are good motors out there, both new, used. They're 10 grand ish, depending on mileage. You can get a short block, which for everyone that doesn't know is like just the heart of it, basically pistons, rods, the main block, but you don't get heads and stuff like that or accessories. I might do that because I can keep my accessories for my motor, but like, oh god, like is my oil system, which is dry sumped and $3,000, full of metal?
Probably assume everything in that's fucked, because if you go out and you spend a bunch of money and like put something together and you use something that is compromised,
oh my god, I'm gonna
just
hate myself
no.
forever.
You just let it go.
Yeah,
you let it go. I think that one you just let it go. You make a table.
Exactly. Yeah,
just
use
eat
the
off of it.
titanium rods to do something.
And which you did mention, and I think we should do. We're gonna have you back on the show anyway, because I like having you on the show. We're gonna talk more about other shit that you do. I just think
there's a lot more to go.
This
down.
is just like there's so many friggin' rabbit holes with you.
Yeah.
And this is great, but I do want to plug Motive.
Definitely, yeah.
What is we've gone over an hour and a half, so for those who are still with us, and I will tee it up at the beginning, but what is Motive? What is your new business venture?
So when I I'm not going to go down a huge rabbit hole. I graduated and started a business with Isaac, who you've probably heard about a little bit by now. And we are machine designers and builders, so we build CNC machines and componentry for those. And we have a shop in Beverly that we are manufacturing these in. We are in our startup phase, so we got a little bit of seed money, and we're building out our shop and getting our machines running. And we are hoping that in the next few years, we'll be able to start selling machines to people and using the machines that we have in-house to do custom manufacturing for both small and large scale. We have a few gigs coming at us, friends and family type things so far, so we're slowly getting traction, but we're really looking forward to the next few months as we grow and as our machines get better and stuff like that.
I'll put it in the show notes. I think there's some cool stuff coming out of there, and I hope you focus on building really concentric valves.
It can be step one is, oh God, how to engineer a better LS7.
So that is Mike Alberding. He started a new company. I'm going to put some stuff in the show notes because his Z06 breakdown with the LS7 failure on YouTube is probably one of the best videos out there to explain what the valve drop issue is and all this stuff. It's great. And he, as an engineer and as an intelligent person, is able to describe that better than I've seen. I always just get the runaround from most people because they either don't know what they're talking about or they know so much about what they're talking about that they do not know how to communicate it to somebody like me. So thank you so much for listening to the podcast, watching the YouTube channel, supporting on the Patreon. Don't forget to respect the drive, and I'll see you in the next one.